I never thought I'd spend my 68th birthday in an abandoned garage, surrounded by old motor oil and dust. But there I was, fumbling with a strange key in the dark, tears blurring my eyes as my son's voice replayed in my head. "You're just a useless old woman, Mom. What would you even do with a real inheritance?" Dad knew that. If you're watching this, make sure you hit subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. My hand shook as I pushed the key into the rusty lock. The door creaked open and my flashlight sliced through years of shadows. What I saw made me stop cold. This couldn't be what Michael meant when he left me, the garage. But maybe I should start from the beginning, the day everything fell apart. That morning I stood beside my son Daniel in our lawyer's office. He looked perfect in his tailored suit. I wore the same black dress from Michael's funeral 3 weeks ago. Our family attorney, Mr. Hughes, looked uneasy as he adjusted his glasses. "Everything here," he said carefully, "is exactly as Mr. Miller requested." I didn't realize then how much that warning would sting. The will was read quickly. "To my son, Daniel Miller, I leave our penthouse in Seattle and all major investments." Then came my name, almost like an afterthought. "To my beloved wife, Margaret Miller, I leave the property at 1420 Industrial Avenue." The garage and its contents. A garage. After 42 years of marriage, that was what he left me. Daniel's sorrow turned into smug victory. He squeezed my shoulder, smiling too wide. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of you." That evening he drove me back to what I still thought of as home, the penthouse overlooking the city. But as soon as we walked in, he set down my suitcase and said flatly, "It'd be best if you found somewhere else to stay. The penthouse is mine now. It's in the will." I stared at him. "What do you mean? Where am I supposed to go?" He shrugged. "You could stay with Aunt Linda. Or, there's that garage Dad left you." Then he laughed, sharp and cold. "What are you gonna do, open a repair shop at your age?" I felt something inside me break. "Daniel, this is my home. Your father and I." He cut me off. "It's not yours anymore. Dad made that clear." I could barely breathe. "You don't expect me to leave tonight, do you?" His face hardened. "You'll figure it out." And that's when he said it, "You're just a useless old woman, Mom." Dad knew that. Hours later, I was still driving with no idea where to go, until I found myself parked outside a rundown building in the industrial district. The address from the will. I sat there for a long time before stepping out, the cold air biting at my face. Now standing in that dark garage, I expected piles of junk. Instead, my flashlight caught the outlines of 3 cars under perfectly fitted covers. Then I saw it. The silver grille of a vintage Aston Martin gleaming faintly in the light. My heart stopped. Why had Michael kept this secret from me? What was this place really? I didn't know it yet, but I was about to discover the truth, and realize my husband's final gift was nothing like I'd imagined. My fingers trembled as I pulled the cover off the Aston Martin. The soft fabric slid away, revealing a 1964 DB5. That same silver birch beauty Sean Connery drove in those old Bond movies Michael loved so much. It gleamed under my flashlight, flawless, like it had never aged a day. "Michael," I whispered into the still air, "what were you doing?" He'd never mentioned collecting cars, not once in 42 years. No hints, no secret passion, nothing. I moved to the next car, my pulse quickening as I lifted the cover. A 1956 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing shimmered beneath it, deep blue paint glowing like a night sky. Then came the third. A red 1967 Ferrari 275 GTB4, its plaque polished and perfect. Each one had a leather folder beside it, filled with documents and records that looked far too official for hobby cars. These weren't collectibles. They were treasures. I murmured to myself, "There's got to be an explanation." That's when I saw it. An envelope taped to the wall near a light switch, my name written in Michael's familiar handwriting. I pulled it down, turned on the lights and gasped. The whole space lit up bright as day. This wasn't some dusty garage. It was a climate-controlled, fully finished showroom, complete with security systems and polished floors. I sat on a leather bench, the envelope heavy in my hands, and finally opened it. "My dearest Margaret," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've found what I meant to be my final gift to you. I'm sorry for the secrecy. It wasn't meant to hurt you, but to protect what I was building for your future." He explained that 6 years ago, after his diagnosis, he'd been told he had only 5 years left. He'd fought for 6. And during that time he'd been planning, for me. You're wondering about the will, he wrote. Why I left the penthouse to Daniel. It tore me apart, but I saw how he'd changed, so ambitious, so cold. I worried that if I left everything to both of you, he'd find ways to control it all. I've seen how he talks to you when he thinks I'm not listening. I couldn't let that continue after I was gone. Tears blurred the words. I hadn't realized Michael noticed those moments. I'd always excused them, pretending Daniel was just stressed, not cruel. So I made a choice, the letter continued. He got what he values. The home, the image, the status. But you, my love, have the real inheritance. These cars alone are worth about $12 million. My advisor, Mark Whitmore, can help you manage or sell them. And in the safe behind our Venice photo, combinations our anniversary, you'll find deeds to several properties, all in your name, and enough financial accounts to keep you secure for life. My hands shook as I set the letter down. $12 million. A safe. A trust in my name. I turned toward the photo on the wall, realizing for the first time that Michael's garage wasn't just a parting gift, it was a message. A final act of love hidden in plain sight. It was a photo of Michael and me on the Rialto Bridge, laughing while a street musician played during our 35th anniversary trip. My hands shook as I entered our anniversary date on the small safe behind the frame. With a soft click, it opened. Inside was a thick portfolio and a few labeled USB drives. The first document read Estate of Michael Miller, Complete Asset Inventory for Margaret Miller. I flipped it open and felt my breath catch. There were pages of numbers, property listings, and accounts. Apartment buildings in Seattle, commercial spaces in Chicago, even a vineyard in Northern California. Stocks, bonds, private investments. The total at the bottom made my head spin. I turned back to the letter. I know this must be overwhelming, Michael had written. At first, this was just my way to manage the fear of what was coming. But as it grew, I realized keeping it quiet was safer, especially if Daniel learned how much was here. My chest tightened as I read on. I could have protected you more directly, he wrote, but I wanted to see who our son had truly become. Maybe he'd prove himself worthy of trust. But if he didn't, this, my love, is your freedom, your protection, your independence. I covered my mouth as a sob escaped. Michael had known. He'd seen the change in Daniel long before I admitted it. Character shows itself most clearly at inheritance, he'd written. Daniel is facing a test. You, my love, are receiving the means to live as you choose, beholden to no one. I pressed the letter to my chest and wept. For 42 years I thought I'd known everything about my husband. Now, surrounded by millions of dollars worth of classic cars, I finally understood the depth of his love, quiet, deliberate, and far-sighted. Just hours earlier, my son had thrown me out, calling me a useless old woman while thinking he'd won everything. How wrong he'd been. That night, I slept on a small leather sofa in an office tucked behind the garage. By morning, I realized Michael had thought of everything. The office had a bathroom, a mini fridge stocked with snacks and water, even a closet with clothes in my size, tags still on. My practical husband had planned for this. In daylight, the garage's disguise amazed me. The weathered exterior hid a modern, climate-controlled facility with advanced security and custom lighting. What looked like a forgotten warehouse was, in truth, a fortress of beauty and precision. After breakfast, I called the number from Michael's letter. Despite the early hour, a calm British voice answered. Mrs. Miller, I've been expecting your call. Please accept my condolences. Michael wasn't just a client, he was a friend. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore, I said, my voice still shaky. I'm overwhelmed. I only discovered the garage last night. 2 hours later, a distinguished man in his 60s arrived in a modest sedan, parking beside my old Toyota. Silver-haired, dressed neatly in a tweed jacket, Mark Whitmore looked exactly like the kind of man Michael would have trusted. Mrs. Miller, he said kindly, shaking my hand. It's an honor, though I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. We sat in the small office as he poured coffee from a thermos. Your husband began collecting these cars about 6 years ago, he explained. He was incredibly meticulous, verified every purchase, every document. He once told me cars were the perfect balance between art and investment. Tangible beauty, he called it. Something that brings joy just by existing. And in that moment, surrounded by gleaming metal and quiet memories, I finally believed him. Mark poured another cup of coffee and said quietly, Your husband once told me that cars were unlike stocks or bonds. They could be admired in so many ways. As art, as engineering, as history, and yes, as investment. He wanted to leave you something real, something you could see and touch, not just numbers on a statement. My throat tightened. That was so like Michael, practical but deeply thoughtful. Mark continued, the collection's worth around $12 million now, but its value keeps rising. These are what we call blue-chip models in the collector world. I stared at the 3 shining cars. And what am I supposed to do with them? He smiled. Whatever you wish, Mrs. Miller. Sell them, keep them, drive them, though driving them might hurt their value. There's no rush. Michael prepaid storage and maintenance for 5 years. After he left, promising to help whenever I needed him, the silence of the garage felt different. Yesterday I thought I was homeless. Today I was a wealthy woman with choices I'd never dreamed of. Still, I had nowhere to go but this secret haven my husband had built. I spent the afternoon reviewing documents from the safe, slowly piecing together just how much Michael had prepared. Beyond the cars there were income properties, investments, trusts, all seamlessly transferred to my name. Then I found one document that made me gasp. The deed to a small cottage in Carmel, that little coastal town we used to visit and adore. Michael had bought it 4 years ago, fully furnished, waiting for me. For the first time in days I smiled. I had a home, not just a garage but a real, peaceful home. Evening brought an unexpected call. Daniel's name flashed on my phone. I hesitated, then answered. Mom, where are you? His tone wasn't worry, it was annoyance. Aunt Linda said she hasn't heard from you. I'm fine, Daniel. I found somewhere to stay, I said evenly. Well, I need you to come pick up the rest of your stuff. Designers start tomorrow and they need the place cleared out. No apology. No compassion. Just business. I see, I said calmly. When would be convenient? Tomorrow morning. Before 9. As he spoke, I looked at the portfolio spread before me, evidence of Michael's love and foresight, and I made my decision. I'll be there. After I hung up, I called Mark again and asked for an attorney's recommendation. By nightfall, I had appointments with both a lawyer and a financial advisor for the next day. That second night in the garage office, I slept more peacefully. My fear had turned into focus. I thought of Michael, how he'd planned every detail to protect me even if it meant hiding it all. You knew him better than I did, I whispered into the dark. Our son. It hurt to admit, but it also set me free. His will hadn't been rejection. It was love disguised as strategy. Tomorrow I'd face Daniel one last time. I'd collect the few things that still mattered from what had once been our home, and then I'd begin the life Michael had built for me in secret. As I drifted off, I couldn't help but smile, wondering what expression would cross my son's face if he ever learned what was hidden in the worthless garage he'd mocked. But that truth, if it ever came, would be on my terms. For now, I had the quiet power of being underestimated. A so-called useless old woman, holding the keys to a secret fortune and a second chance. The next morning, I arrived at the penthouse at 8:45 sharp. Dressed in a navy pantsuit I'd found in the garage closet, elegant, understated, I'd done my hair carefully. Small rebellions maybe, but they gave me strength. Daniel opened the door, phone in hand, barely glancing up as I stepped into what used to be my home. The space felt different already, colder, emptier, as if it knew who truly belonged there and who didn't. The penthouse felt unfamiliar the moment I walked in. Some of my favorite pieces were gone, and the family photos that once lined the hallway had vanished, leaving pale rectangles on the walls. Jonathan finally tucked his phone away. I boxed up most of your stuff, he said briskly. The designers will be here at 9:30, so let's be efficient. No hello. No, how are you? Just business. Good morning to you too, Daniel, I replied evenly. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He led me toward the bedroom where several boxes sat neatly stacked. No point waiting, he said with a shrug. This place needs a full update if I want to maximize its value. Its value? I repeated. Yeah. I'll live here for a year then flip it. The market's hot. I said nothing though the words stung. This was the home Michael and I had built together. And your father's things? I asked quietly. Daniel gestured toward another corner. I kept his Rolex and cufflinks. The rest, clothes, books, old man stuff, you can take or donate. Doesn't matter. I knelt beside one of the boxes, running my hand over Michael's books, his fountain pens, the sweater I'd given him last Christmas that still smelled faintly of him. To Daniel they were just clutter. To me they were pieces of a life. As I sorted through them, Daniel checked his watch and sighed. "Can't you hurry this up? It's just stuff, Mom. You don't even have a place to keep it." I looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time. Handsome, yes, but his father's warmth was nowhere in him. "I have a place," I said quietly. "And I'll take the time I need. These aren't just possessions. They're memories." He rolled his eyes. "Fine. Just finish by 9:30. Then he walked out, already on his phone again. Left alone, I moved through each box, each room, grieving not only for Michael but for the son I thought I'd known. How long had he been this way, cold, transactional? How long had I been making excuses? When I'd packed what mattered, I found Daniel in the study. Half the room was empty, Michael's mahogany desk replaced with a glass and chrome one that looked sterile and soulless. "I'm done," I said from the doorway. He glanced up briefly. "Need help carrying it down? I can call the doorman." "That would be nice. I'd like a few minutes alone if you don't mind. 15 years of memories deserve a goodbye." He hesitated, maybe even felt a flicker of guilt, then nodded. "Sure. Just lock up when you leave." When he left, I took my time. I walked through every room, whispering silent farewells to the life I'd shared with Michael. In our closet, something caught my eye. His old leather messenger bag tucked behind a stack of boxes. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name and a note in his familiar hand. "If you find this, Margaret, it's a backup of everything in the garage safe, just in case." Even gone, my husband's foresight amazed me. I slipped the envelope into my purse like a secret blessing. The doorman helped load my things into the car. I stood there for a moment, looking up at the building that had once been home. I felt loss, yes, but also freedom. That penthouse had been beautiful, but the garage, the cottage, the trust, those were Michael's true gifts. They weren't just assets. They were independence. I drove straight to the office of Patricia Winters, the attorney Mark had recommended. A sharp, confident woman in her 50s, she greeted me with a firm handshake. "Mrs. Miller," she said, "I've reviewed the documents you sent. Your husband crafted a remarkable estate plan." I nodded, sitting across from her. I'm still trying to understand just how much he planned, and how well he knew me. Patricia adjusted her glasses, scanning the papers spread across her desk. "From what I see, everything is in perfect order," she said. "Your husband worked with excellent counsel. The trust structures are clean, the transfers airtight. My question is, what do you want to do next?" I thought for a moment. "I need to understand my finances completely, find a permanent place to live, and decide how to handle things with my son." She nodded thoughtfully. "That last part may be the hardest. Have you decided whether to tell him about the inheritance?" "Not yet," I admitted. "Part of me wants him to keep believing all I have is that garage. Let him live with what he's done. But I'm not sure that's the right thing either." "There's no rush," she said gently. "For now, let's get you settled. Visit the Carmel property. If it feels right, make it your home." 2 hours later, I left her office with a clear plan. Visit the cottage, meet the financial team, and take my time before making any big decisions. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Designers love the space. Starting full renovation. Dropped your old photo albums at Aunt Linda's. Didn't think you'd want them." I stared at the message, feeling a familiar ache. No concern. No kindness. Just another careless erasure of my life. I didn't reply. Instead, I booked a hotel in Carmel. It was time to see the home Michael had truly meant for me. The drive south calmed something deep inside. Highway 1 curled along the cliffs, the Pacific stretching endlessly beside me. Sunlight danced on the water, painting the world gold. For the first time since Michael's death, I wasn't grieving, I was moving forward. Carmel appeared like something out of a storybook. Tree-lined streets, stone cottages, air scented with salt and pine. When the GPS announced my destination, I turned down a quiet lane and stopped in front of a small stone cottage tucked behind tall cypress trees. It wasn't large or grand, but it radiated peace. A wooden gate opened onto a garden of lavender and roses, the path leading to a Dutch door. With trembling hands, I used the key Michael had left for me and stepped inside. The sight took my breath away. Every detail reflected me. Soft colors, natural light, the kind of quiet warmth I'd always loved. Bookshelves framed a stone fireplace. The furniture was cozy, perfectly chosen. Through the window I could glimpse the ocean. But it was the little study that undid me. Above the writing desk hung a watercolor of the Venice Canal where Michael had proposed. We'd lost the original years ago, but here was a replica, painted just for me. The tears came gently this time. Not grief but gratitude. Michael hadn't just built security, he'd built sanctuary. I sat by the window, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon, finally feeling at home again. A soft knock broke the silence. When I opened the door, an elegant woman in her 70s stood smiling, holding a covered dish. "Hello," she said kindly. "You must be Margaret. I'm Evelyn Harper, your neighbor 2 doors down. Robert, Michael, asked me to look in on you when you arrived." I blinked, startled. "You knew him?" She nodded warmly. "Oh yes. He came by often, getting everything ready for you." Her words hit me like sunlight breaking through clouds. Even in his final years, Michael had been preparing not just a house, but a home and a future I was finally ready to live. "I'm one of the few people who knew about his project," Evelyn said as she handed me a covered dish. "He made me promise not to reach out until you arrived. It's just a simple casserole. I figured you might not want to cook your first night here." I smiled, touched by the kindness that felt like an extension of Michael's care. "Thank you. Please come in." Over tea in the cozy kitchen, Evelyn filled in the pieces I hadn't known. "Michael was so particular about getting everything right," she said, smiling at the memory. "He brought photos of your old home, determined to capture your style while making it belong here. He said this place was for your protection, though he never said from what." I blinked back tears. "He never mentioned any of it to me." "He said you might need a friend when you finally came," she added softly. "Someone who understands how to rebuild after loss. My husband passed 8 years ago. A change is not easy or just different. And having good neighbors helps." When she left, promising to introduce me around town when I was ready, I sat quietly, overwhelmed by Michael's foresight. He hadn't just provided a home, he'd made sure I wouldn't be alone. That night, I fell asleep to the sound of the ocean and the soft tick of a clock in the hallway. For the first time since losing him, my sleep was peaceful. The next morning, I explored the cottage in daylight. In the study, tucked inside the desk, I found a folder filled with local contacts. Doctors, repair services, community numbers, even a prepaid library membership. Beneath it lay a handwritten note dated just 3 months before he passed. "My dearest Margaret," it began, "if you're reading this, you've made it to Carmel. I wish more than anything I could be there, walking the beach with you, watching the sunset from the garden. I know this transition won't be easy, but I've always admired your strength, even when you didn't see it yourself. This cottage is yours, to live in, to sell, to love, or to leave. My only hope is that it gives you peace and freedom. Always, Michael." I pressed the note to my heart, tears slipping down my face. Even in death, he was still guiding me toward independence, still reminding me that my life was mine to shape. Over the next few days, I settled into a gentle rhythm. Morning walks on the beach, quiet afternoons exploring shops and cafes, evenings watching the sky fade through the trees. The cottage began to feel less like something Michael had left behind and more like something we had built together. My sanctuary for whatever came next. On the 4th morning, as I sipped coffee in the garden, my phone buzzed. Daniel's name lit the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello, Daniel. Mom, where are you?" His voice carried that familiar impatience. "Aunt Linda said you're not staying with her. Ruth hasn't seen you either." "I'm taking some time for myself," I said calmly. "I found a place to stay." "What does that mean? You can't just disappear like this." "I'm not discussing my location right now," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my tone. "Was there something you needed?" He hesitated. "Actually, yes. I found some notes in Dad's papers. References to meetings with financial advisors, maybe other investments that weren't mentioned in the will. Do you know anything about that?" My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. "Your father managed most of our finances. If there were additional accounts, I'm sure his attorney would have told you." "Maybe," he said, clearly unconvinced. "When are you coming back to the city? We should talk about this in person." "I'm not sure," I replied honestly. "I need some time away." He sighed sharply. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't just vanish without telling anyone. What if something happens to you?" I smiled faintly at the irony. I'm perfectly fine, Daniel. Truly. And for the first time in a very long time I meant it. I'm not wandering and I'm not alone, I told him, keeping my tone even. I just need time to process everything that's happened. This isn't like you, Daniel snapped, his voice sharp with suspicion. First Dad leaves you almost nothing, then you vanish. People are starting to talk. I almost laughed. Let them talk, Daniel. I've stopped caring what people think. After I hung up, I sat in the garden, the sea breeze soft against my face, and considered what this new tension meant. Daniel was digging, searching for assets he thought should have been his. How long before he uncovered the truth? Robert's question from his letter echoed in my mind. Had Daniel proven himself worthy of sharing in this inheritance? So far, his behavior made the answer painfully clear. Still, I couldn't help but wonder if the kind, thoughtful boy I'd once known was buried somewhere beneath all that ambition. The cottage had given me more than safety. It had given me space to think clearly again. 2 weeks later, I'd settled into a quiet, steady rhythm. Mornings started with coffee in the garden or foggy walks on the beach. Afternoons were for practical matters. Meeting with advisors, reviewing the properties and investments Robert had hidden so carefully. I was beginning to understand the full scope of his plan. The systems your husband designed are remarkably stable, said Howard Lane, the financial advisor who'd worked with Robert in secret. Most clients focus on building wealth. Robert wanted to build structure, something that would never overwhelm you. We sat in his Monterey office reviewing statements. He knew I wasn't a financial expert, I said. Howard smiled. He mentioned that. But he also said you had remarkable intuition, especially about people. He trusted that completely. That simple statement warmed me. Even in secrecy, Robert had believed in me. Then Howard's tone shifted. There is one concern. We've received inquiries from a Daniel Miller, claiming to be conducting a review of his father's finances. My grip tightened on my cup. My son. What was he asking? He wanted details on additional investments. Of course, I declined. Client confidentiality is absolute. Thank you, I said quietly. Robert's intentions were very clear. Howard nodded. Just be aware he's persistent. He's contacted several firms already. Driving back to Carmel, I mulled over his words. Daniel's curiosity was becoming determination. It was only a matter of time before he connected the dots. What would I do then? I turned onto my street and my heart sank. Parked in front of the cottage was a sleek SUV with a vanity plate that read J. Miller. Daniel. He stood waiting by the gate, arms crossed, his expression tight with accusation. Found you, he said as if we were playing a game. Nice place, Mom. When were you planning to mention you own property in one of the most expensive towns in California? I kept my tone calm, though my pulse hammered in my chest. Hello, Daniel. This is a surprise. I'll bet, he muttered, eyeing the cottage like an auditor. Why don't you come inside? I said evenly. No need to give the neighbors a show. He followed me in, scanning every detail of the home Robert had built for me. The paintings, the books, the warmth. His face was unreadable, but his eyes burned with suspicion. And I knew without question that the moment I'd been dreading had arrived. I could see the calculation in Daniel's eyes as he scanned the room, silently assigning a dollar value to every detail. Charming, he said finally, turning the word into an insult. So, this is why you've been dodging my calls? Hiding out in a secret vacation home. I haven't been hiding, I replied evenly. I've been processing, deciding how to move forward. I set my purse down and met his stare. How did you find me? He smirked. I'm not incompetent, Mom. When you vanished, I hired a private investigator. Told him I was worried my elderly mother might be confused after her husband's death. The words hit like a slap. The quiet cruelty of painting me as fragile to justify invading my privacy. I see, I said. And he tracked me here? Eventually. The property records were interesting. Dad bought this place 4 years ago, but it doesn't appear in any of his main accounts. His eyes narrowed. Makes me wonder what else he kept from us. I turned to the kitchen and filled the kettle, letting the simple motion calm me. Your father had his reasons for structuring the will as he did. The cottage was meant to be a surprise. He followed, leaning against the doorway. A surprise, he said flatly. Like that dump of a garage. Another one of Dad's secrets. My hands froze. You've been to the garage? Yesterday, he said. Locked tight, but the windows gave me a glimpse. Classic cars, expensive ones. I saw enough to know they're worth a fortune. Probably more than the penthouse Dad left me. So he'd found part of the truth but not the whole of it. Your father's gifts to you were substantial, I said carefully. Substantial. He laughed bitterly. The penthouse needs hundreds of thousands in repairs. The portfolio barely covers my expenses. Meanwhile, you're living in a Carmel cottage and sitting on millions in hidden assets. I poured boiling water into the teapot, the ritual steadying me. What exactly do you want, Daniel? The truth, he shot back. Did you know about this? Were you and Dad planning some scheme to cut me out? No, I said firmly, meeting his gaze. I knew nothing. The cottage, the garage, I learned about them only after your father's death. He blinked, thrown off balance. Then why keep it from me? Why vanish instead of explaining? Because I needed time to understand it myself, I said quietly. And because your behavior after the will reading didn't inspire much trust. He flinched, then straightened. I was upset. Finding out Dad disinherited me. Disinherited? I interrupted. He left you a multi-million-dollar home and investment accounts most people would dream of. A fraction of what he hid, Daniel snapped. Those cars alone are worth. How would you know their value? I asked softly, unless you've been investigating more than you've admitted? He hesitated, then looked down. I have contacts in the collector world. I asked around. Based on what I saw, they're rare, very rare. Of course you did, I murmured, weary of his endless maneuvering. I poured 2 cups of tea and set one before him. If we're going to have this conversation, let's at least be civil. Something in him shifted then. His anger softened into something almost fragile. For the first time I saw fear behind his frustration. The fear of being left out, left behind. Daniel, I said gently, why does this matter so much? You have a successful career, a home, more security than most. Why chase what's gone? He stared down at his cup, voice low. It's not about the money, he said. Not really. Then what is it about? I asked softly. Daniel looked up, and for a brief moment I saw the boy he used to be, uncertain, searching for approval. It's about what it means, he said. Dad trusted you with all of this, the money, the secrets. He didn't trust me. And there was. Beneath the arrogance and anger lay something simpler. Not greed, but pain. Rejection. Oh, Daniel, I sighed. It wasn't about trust. Your father wanted to protect both of us in different ways. He gave a bitter laugh. By hiding millions from you and making it look like he left me scraps? I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. The afternoon sun spilled through the cottage windows, painting long gold streaks across the kitchen table between us. There's a letter, I said finally. From your father. It explains everything far better than I can. Daniel stiffened. A letter? You've had it all this time and didn't think to tell me? It was addressed to me, I replied evenly. And considering how you treated me after the will reading, I wasn't eager to share something so personal. You called me a useless old woman and threw me out of my home. His eyes dropped for a moment, guilt flickering across his face. I was angry. People say things they don't mean. Do they? I asked quietly. Or do they finally say what's been buried? He didn't answer. This letter, he said instead, do you have it here? I went to the study and returned with the copy I'd found in Michael's messenger bag. Before handing it to him, I said gently, your father loved you. None of this was meant to hurt you. Let me decide that, he muttered, snatching the pages. I watched as he read. His expression shifted, curiosity, disbelief, then something darker. His knuckles whitened as he reached the part about his character. When he finished, he laid the letter down slowly, his control fraying. So, he said, his voice dangerously quiet, Dad thought I was selfish. Too materialistic to trust. Is that it? He was worried about how your priorities had changed, I said softly. He feared what might happen if you controlled my finances. Daniel's voice rose. So his solution was to deceive me? To make me think I'd inherited the valuable assets, when all along he left them to you. He did what he believed was best, I answered. He saw things in you, in both of us, that needed protecting. Daniel pushed back his chair, the legs scraping harshly against the floor. He tested me like some experiment and you're defending him? I'm saying maybe it's worth reflecting on why he felt he had to, I replied quietly. He laughed bitterly, pacing the room. Reflect? You want me to reflect on being painted as the villain in my own father's story? That's not what the letter says, I countered calmly. He questioned certain tendencies, he didn't condemn you. Daniel turned, eyes blazing. You're seriously defending this? He left you a fortune and me a humiliation. How would you feel? There was no point arguing. He was right in one sense. Michael had created a test of character and Daniel's reaction had proven its necessity. The question now, I said carefully, is what you plan to do. Oh, that's simple, he snapped. As Michael Miller's son and heir, I have every right to contest this. Hidden assets, secret trusts, it's all manipulation. I met his glare steadily. The legal structures your father built are airtight. Everything was done properly through the courts and with counsel. Challenging it would be long, expensive, and futile. He said nothing, but the look in his eyes told me this wasn't over. You sound awfully confident for someone who used to claim she knew nothing about finances, Daniel said, his tone cutting. I've had several weeks to learn, I replied calmly. I've been working with the same advisors who helped your father set this up. He turned away, bracing his hands against the counter, silent for a long moment. When he finally faced me again, his anger had shifted to calculation. I knew that look, the same one I'd seen in his business dealings. What if we reach a compromise, he said smoothly. Something more equitable. Half maybe. A fair distribution that still honors Dad's wishes. No, I said firmly, surprising even myself. I'm not negotiating your father's final decisions. This isn't about money, Daniel. It's about what he wanted. His way of making sure I'd never again depend on anyone's goodwill, including yours. So that's it. His voice hardened. You keep everything because Dad was paranoid about me? I stood, meeting him eye to eye. What I do with these assets will depend on many things, but your entitlement isn't helping your case. Pie case. He laughed bitterly. So I'm on trial now? In a way, yes, I said. Your father's letter gave me discretion to share this inheritance only if you showed certain qualities. Your behavior since his death will shape that choice. He stared at me, stunned. Maybe for the first time he was seeing me not as the mother who would always yield, but as someone standing on her own ground. You can't be serious, he said finally. You're holding Dad's fortune hostage until I pass some moral test? I'm honoring his wishes, I replied. He wanted to protect what he built, and the people he loved. He snatched his car keys from the table. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. As he stormed toward the door, I called after him, before you run to an attorney, consider this. What if your father was right? What if the inheritance he left you was meant to teach you something about yourself? He paused just long enough to say, save the lectures, Mom. I've had enough Miller family wisdom for one lifetime. Then the door slammed. When the house fell quiet again, I sat down, exhaustion flooding through me. The confrontation had gone exactly as I'd feared. Daniel seeing only what he'd been denied, not what his father had tried to give. Yet beneath all that anger, I'd glimpsed something raw and human. A wounded son who felt rejected by his father's judgment. I brewed another cup of tea and carried it to the garden. The late sun shimmered on the Pacific and the wind smelled faintly of salt and pine. Michael had prepared me for this moment, but not for the weight of it, of holding his trust, his wealth, and our son's fragile pride in my hands. My phone buzzed with a text. Saw your son leave in a hurry. Everything okay? It was from Evelyn. I'm making lasagna if you'd like to join me. Tears welled unexpectedly. That sounds wonderful, I replied. It's been a long day. As the sun dipped low over the ocean, I realized the future would bring more battles. Legal, emotional, maybe both. Daniel might fight or he might one day reflect and change. Either way, I would carry out Michael's wishes, not just to protect the fortune but to protect the meaning behind it. That evening, I went next door for dinner, choosing connection over conflict. The next chapter, I decided, would be lived on my terms. 3 months later, autumn arrived in Carmel. The air turned crisp, the crowds thinned, and my days settled into a quiet rhythm, tending the garden, managing the properties, walking the shore each morning. With Patricia Winter's guidance, I'd built a structure for this new life. Steady, independent, peaceful. And for the first time since Michael's death, I felt not like someone surviving but like someone becoming. The cars stayed safely stored in the garage, cared for by Marcus Weatherby's team. Sometimes I'd drive the Aston Martin along the coast, feeling the wind and the strange closeness of Michael beside me, as if through that engine's quiet roar, we were sharing something he'd loved. Daniel and I kept a distant truce, limited to brief formal emails. His attempt to contest the will had fizzled when attorneys confirmed the estate's airtight structure. His last message 2 weeks earlier had been coldly professional, a request for old family photos, nothing more. I was pruning the roses one afternoon when a dark sedan pulled up to the cottage. A woman stepped out, tall, polished, exuding corporate composure. "Mrs. Miller? I'm Diane Reeves, Daniel's assistant. May I have a word?" Something in her tone, brisk but uneasy, made my stomach tighten. "Of course," I said, leading her inside. She declined tea and sat stiffly on the sofa, opening a slim portfolio. "Mrs. Miller, I'm here because Daniel's experienced some setbacks. He asked me to speak with you directly." My pulse quickened. "What kind of setbacks?" "Financial," she said, matter of fact. "The penthouse renovations went over budget. Nearly double. Structural issues, unexpected costs. At the same time, a major investment he made collapsed after regulatory problems. He's facing serious losses." I nodded slowly. I wasn't surprised. Michael had warned years ago that the building's infrastructure needed work, but Daniel had brushed him off. And Daniel's appetite for risk had always outpaced his caution. Diane's tone softened. "He's in danger of foreclosure. With his liquidity tied up, he can't meet loan payments. He hoped you might consider helping, financially." There was the plea I'd known would come, wrapped in polite formality, delivered by proxy. I kept my voice calm. "Has Daniel considered selling the penthouse?" "He has," she said, hesitating. "But mid-renovation the values dropped significantly. There are also complications with the contractors. Meaning he'd probably driven them away with arrogance or unpaid bills." "Please tell Daniel I've received his request," I said at last. "I'll consider it." Diane looked startled. "Mrs. Miller, time is limited. The bank." "I understand," I interrupted gently. "But I won't make a decision today." After she left, I sat in the garden, letting the quiet settle. Michael's foresight now felt almost prophetic. He'd known this would happen, that Daniel's ambition would outpace his wisdom. The next morning, instead of calling, I drove to the city myself. The doorman recognized me instantly and waved me up. The sight that greeted me broke something inside. The penthouse, once our elegant home, was gutted. Walls torn to studs, wires dangling, marble slabs leaning in dusty corners. The air smelled of plaster and abandonment. I walked carefully through the ruins of our life, past the empty spaces where laughter, dinners, and quiet evenings had once lived. And though sadness pressed heavy on my chest, beneath it was something else, a clear, painful certainty. Michael had been right. Frustration burned in me as I took in the gutted penthouse. The ruined floors, the half-torn walls, the smell of dust and wasted money. Yet beneath it all was gratitude. Gratitude that Michael had protected me from ever depending on Daniel's financial judgment. I was examining water damage near the master bath when I heard the door open. "Mom." His voice echoed through the hollow space. "The doorman said you were here." When he appeared, I barely recognized him. His tailored confidence was gone, replaced by exhaustion. His clothes were still expensive but wrinkled, his face pale, drawn tight with worry. "I wanted to see it for myself," I said quietly, gesturing to the chaos. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Guess Diane filled you in." "She did," I said evenly. "I needed to understand before making any decisions." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched in every motion. "I overextended," he admitted, finally sinking onto an overturned bucket. The investment looked solid. Luxury condos, pre-sales lined up. I borrowed against everything, even the penthouse. Then they found environmental issues. Investors bailed. Everything fell apart. I looked around at the debris, the broken marble, the stripped wiring, the wreckage of both his home and his pride. "Why didn't you reach out sooner?" I asked. He hesitated. After what happened between us, after realizing how Dad tested me, I couldn't. Pride, I said softly. The Miller family trademark. He almost smiled. Something like that. Then, after a pause, have you made a decision about helping me? I'm willing to help, I said, but not by simply writing a check. This needs to address more than the debt. His relief flickered, tempered by unease. What conditions? We'll talk about it properly, I said, stepping around a pile of debris. Not here. Come to Carmel tomorrow. We'll find a real solution, one that actually lasts. He wanted to argue but didn't. Fine, he said at last. Tomorrow. Driving back to Carmel, the contrast struck me sharply. His crumbling penthouse against my quiet cottage, the illusion of wealth against the substance of it. Michael had planned it perfectly. The test, the balance, the truth. The next morning, Daniel arrived precisely at 11. He looked better, polished, controlled, the mask of composure firmly back in place. I'd spent the morning preparing, setting the table on the patio with care. You have a beautiful view, he said stiffly. Your father chose well, I replied, pouring iced tea. He knew how much I loved the coast. Daniel's face tightened at the mention of his father, but he said nothing. The garden stretched before us, sunlight catching the ocean between the trees. Calm, quiet, neutral ground. Before discussing his finances, I slid a leather portfolio toward him. Inside were carefully chosen pages from Michael's estate records. I want to show you something first, I said, watching his fingers hesitate on the cover. The moment had come, not just to decide whether to help him, but how to teach him what his father had meant all along. Daniel opened the portfolio cautiously as if bracing for bad news. These are reports your father commissioned 3 years ago, I explained. Maintenance projections, system assessments for the penthouse. The numbers match almost exactly what you've been facing. He frowned. Dad never mentioned this. He tried, I said gently. You dismissed it as overreacting. He showed you these the Christmas before his diagnosis. Recognition flickered across his face. That boring building report he kept talking about. The same one, I said softly. He wasn't just being cautious, he was trying to prepare you. Daniel set the folder down, jaw tight. If you brought me here to say, I told you so. I didn't, I cut in. I'm setting context. Your father saw this coming, not just the building issues but the choices that led here. His brow furrowed. What choices? Prioritizing image over substance, I said simply. Chasing big returns instead of steady progress. Ignoring warning signs. The same pattern that led you to throw me out instead of listening. He looked away, guilt shadowing his face. I shouldn't have done that. No, I agreed. You shouldn't have. The ocean wind rustled through the garden. For a long time neither of us spoke. I'd spent years softening my tone with him, walking on eggshells. Now I let the silence hold. Finally he asked, so, what are these conditions for your help? First, complete transparency, I said. Every account, every debt, every contract, no omissions. He nodded, tense. Fine. What else? Professional financial management. Any support I provide will go through a trust with oversight. So I'll be on an allowance? He said bitterly. Like someone rebuilding after serious mistakes, I replied. It's not punishment, it's protection. He stared at me. And who controls the trust? You. No, I said. Independent trustees. I'm not interested in controlling you, Daniel. Only in making sure help actually helps. He leaned back, torn between pride and desperation. And the penthouse. It's still technically mine. The practical choice is to sell it, I said. Even unfinished, it could cover your debts and give you a clean start. Sell it. He looked stunned. That's our family home. It's a space, Daniel, I said gently. You were ready to tear it apart months ago. Memories don't live in walls. He stood and began to pace. You don't understand. Selling means failure. Everyone would know. There's nothing left to hide, I said softly. Construction's stopped. Contractors are suing. People already know. He stopped, shoulders slumping. I've ruined everything, haven't I? For the first time since Michael's death, I saw past the arrogance, to the frightened, uncertain son underneath. Not everything, I said. But fixing this will take humility and change. He sank into his chair, eyes weary. So what exactly are you offering? A structured way forward, I said. I'll set up a trust to cover the most urgent debts and prevent foreclosure. Professionals will assess the penthouse, to finish or to sell, whichever makes sense. In return, you agree to oversight and counseling. You start facing what really got you here. He stared at me, silent. Somewhere behind his tired eyes, the first faint flicker of reflection appeared. Fragile, uncertain, but real. I hesitated, then spoke the hardest part. And Daniel, you make amends for how you treated me after your father died. His eyes lifted sharply. Amends? What does that even mean? It means owning the harm you caused, I said quietly. It means realizing that relationships have consequences just like financial choices do. I leaned forward. I'm not offering help as a transaction, Daniel. I'm offering it as your mother, because I still believe you can be better than what I've seen. Something shifted in his face. The defiance faltered, replaced by something raw. I didn't mean what I said that day, he murmured. About you being useless. I was angry. Maybe, I said. But anger only uncovers what's already there. You've carried that attitude for a long time. He didn't argue, and that for once was progress. I need time to think, he said at last. Take it, I told him. But remember, creditors don't wait for emotional clarity. You'll have to act soon. An hour later, when he left, there were no promises, but something had changed. For the first time in years, our conversation had been real. No pretense, no appeasement. Just truth between us, stripped bare. That night, sitting in the quiet garden, I wondered what Michael would have thought. Maybe I'd been too harsh, or maybe I'd finally found balance. No longer the soft mother who smoothed everything over, nor the cold businesswoman my son expected. For the first time, I spoke plainly, and whatever came next would stand on that foundation. Months passed. Spring returned to Carmel, filling the garden with color against the blue of the Pacific. It had been nearly 9 months since Michael's death, 6 since I'd discovered the garage, and 4 since Daniel's collapse had forced us to face the truth. 3 days after our conversation, he finally called. I'll do it, he said simply. All of it. Whatever it takes. It wasn't an easy journey. The financial restructuring took weeks of digging through messy accounts and half-truths. The penthouse was partially restored, then sold to pay off debts. But the harder work happened inside him. Therapy, something he'd once mocked, slowly became a place where he began to understand himself. Our own relationship changed too. We stumbled plenty but spoke honestly for once. One bright morning, I was tending the roses when I heard his car pull up. Daniel stepped out carrying a small package. His suit was simpler, his posture easier. He'd grown a short beard that softened his face. He looked more like Michael than ever. The garden looks amazing, he said, kissing my cheek, not out of habit this time but with warmth. Just finishing what your father started, I replied, smiling. Coffee on the patio? As we sat together overlooking the ocean, I realized how different things felt now. Less like confrontation, more like peace. Not perfect but real. Daniel still struggled sometimes, with the limits of the trust, with old habits of pride and control, but the changes were undeniable. The penthouse closes next week, he told me over coffee. We'll clear about 40% more than the initial estimate, thanks to the focused renovations. That's wonderful, I said. It'll give you breathing room for whatever comes next. He set his cup down. That's actually what I wanted to talk about. I've been offered a position with a community development group. Affordable housing projects. I blinked, surprised. Daniel had spent his entire career in luxury real estate, chasing prestige and profit. It's a big pay cut, he went on. But the trust covers my basics and it feels like real work. Work that matters. What changed? I asked softly. He looked toward the water. Remember that failed condo project? The nonprofit that bought the land is building mixed-income housing there. I've been consulting with them. It's strange, but I'm good at it. The design, the logistics, without the greed. I studied his face. For the first time in years, he looked animated, alive. Your father would find that deeply satisfying, I said. Not ironic. Satisfying. He smiled faintly, then reached for the small package he'd brought. Speaking of Dad, I found something while clearing out the penthouse. Inside was a wooden box I recognized immediately, Michael's cufflinks and tie pins. I thought these connected me to him, Daniel said quietly as I opened the lid. But they're just objects. The real connection isn't in things. Beneath the cufflinks lay a small velvet pouch. Inside was my original wedding band, the one I thought lost forever. Daniel handed me an envelope next, my name in Michael's familiar handwriting. The card inside read, "The first ring was a promise of the life we would build. This one celebrates the life we created. All my love always." Tucked beside it was a jeweler's receipt, dated just weeks before his final hospitalization. Daniel reached into his pocket and produced a small box. He'd ordered it. "I picked it up for you." Inside lay an eternity band of sapphires and diamonds. Simple, elegant, unmistakably me. The stones caught the sunlight, scattering tiny rainbows across the table. "Oh, Michael," I whispered, sliding it beside my gold band. The two rings gleamed together, beginnings and completion. When I looked up, Daniel was watching quietly, respect softening his features in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "Thank you," I said. "This means more than you'll ever know." We talked for another hour. About his new job, my garden, the steady rhythm of our new lives. As he turned to leave, he paused at the gate. "Whatever happened to those cars?" he asked, a hint of curiosity in his voice. I smiled. "I'm keeping the Aston Martin. Your father would have loved knowing I still drive it along the coast. The others will be sold. The proceeds split between a foundation for financial education and a trust for your future children." He laughed softly. "Future children. That's optimistic." "Your father was always an optimist," I said, smiling toward the sea. And sometimes he was right. Beneath all his careful planning, Michael had always believed people could change, that given the right chance we might grow into better versions of ourselves. Watching Daniel drive away that afternoon, I realized how right he'd been. What had once seemed like a cruelly lopsided inheritance had in time revealed its purpose. His plan had given me security and freedom, and given our son a mirror to face himself honestly for the first time. Not every wound was healed, not every lesson perfectly learned, but something deeper had taken root between us. Honesty instead of obligation, respect instead of roles. That evening I took the Aston Martin out along the coast, the car's low hum blending with the ocean's rhythm. The sun dipped toward the horizon, turning the water into molten gold. My hands, wearing both the simple gold band of beginnings and the sapphire ring of completion, rested steady on the wheel. "You were right," I said softly to the wind, to Michael. About everything that mattered. The worthless garage that once symbolized rejection had become the key to transformation. For me, for Daniel, for what was left of our family. What looked like imbalance had been, in truth, foresight. Love written in practical details and hidden safeguards. As I turned toward home, my home, the cottage by the sea glowed ahead in the fading light. I felt no emptiness now, only peace. The circles of our lives had closed and new ones were already forming. Whatever the years ahead would bring, I knew this much. I carried Michael's wisdom behind me, the lessons of the past within me, and finally, the quiet certainty of my own worth to guide me forward. That small, unassuming garage key had unlocked far more than a door. It had opened an entire life, one built on love, resilience, and the courage to begin again. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if any of this sounds familiar, feel free to share your own story in the comments.